Hi guys, it's Melissa, your plantita abogada from Tasteful Nodes, coming to you today with another horticulture talk, right? So we're not talking specifically about the tea part of horticulture, no? So today's episode is in regards to the article that I shared from The Guardian, Pots of Gold, the world's most expensive houseplants. And I wanted to go ahead and give my opinion of what was included in the article, as well as things that we've seen here in the Philippines, this side of the world, Asia, right? I got my snacks ready. I'm ready to discuss. I hope you read the article, and let's get started. Actually, you know what? Before we start, I have two disclaimers for today, okay? One, I'm not an expert. Anything I say in this video is completely reflections of my personal experiences and observations. And number two, get second opinions on everything, right? What's said in this article doesn't necessarily reflect what happens here on our side of the world in Asia. What I may say may not exactly be what you're seeing on your side of the world. So, you know, do your due diligence. Check out your local plant groups, check out your local plant tea groups as well, and see if everything matches up. There's going to be overlap and there are going to be differences. So go ahead and make sure that you're aware of those things before you come to conclusions of your own. Okay? Great. So, pop quiz, everybody. What would you do? What would you do if you ask someone to take care of your plants? I mean, it's a popular thing to do here. We have people who offer to care for plants of others in exchange for payment of in-kind services, right? So here in the Philippines, what we do is we have people who offer to care for plants, and they'll take a cutting or two of the plant that they raised, that they rehabilitated, right? But if you were in the situation of the plantita from Reddit, whose niece went ahead and chopped up all her plants and sold them, I mean, clearly knowing what the value is, because according to the article, it was a Cebu blue pothos, so an epipremnum pinatum Cebu blue, a string of pearls, a ruby necklace, another succulent, a silver striped philodendron, and a golden pothos that she trained up her stairwell. So it's no small feat. You've got a tall plant crawling up a stairwell. I mean, it's got to take time, right? All of them were decimated, and the niece did not spare the Philodendron pink princess, which had been reduced to 2 leaves, and the Monstera alba, which just now had 3. 35 tropical indoor plants were all cut and sold. What would you do? Would you consider yourself the jerk, essentially? Personally, I wouldn't. Ever since the pandemic happened, right? Everything's gone up in value. We were all locked down, everything. I mean, shipping was a problem. We had shipping delays because everybody was ordering online. We had pricing go up through shipping because everybody was having everything shipped to them. So yeah, everything went up, including the price of houseplants. I mean, what were premium plants back then became outrageous. You know, something that was $200 for a node back then easily, according to the article, became thousands of dollars. I believe that they mentioned that the niece is, a minor, so 14 years old. It would have been something that I would have discussed with her parents, and I would have sought restitution for, you know? So if you answer the same as me, fantastic. If you didn't, I would love to see your answer in the comments. Discuss why you would not have even considered, I mean, just consider. I'm not saying that you would call the police, but I'm saying, would you consider calling the police on someone who has done something like that, decimated your plants, right? So with that, according to the Redditors who were part of that group, the commentators agreed that the niece was caught red-handed. Several of those plants were worth hundreds of pounds. In the case of the Monstera alba, this is a direct quote, the value has skyrocketed as much as any cryptocurrency, and a cutting alone can go for thousands of pounds, right? There was no mix-up. This was a heist. Consult a lawyer, the commentator said. Press charges. This might be a little too much, but hell would be too good a place. Yeah, maybe a little too much. But yeah, I agree. I mean, they voted. The plant parent who threatened her niece with police action was not the asshole. And I agree. So according to the article, what they are seeing as far as the reason for the insane prices was due to the lockdowns of the pandemic. So it does mention that garden centers were closed in 2020, and the Holland growers, the Dutch growers, shut down their factories as well, their production. So, I mean, yeah, we did see a lot of that here. But in terms of the Philippines seeing it here, it was also a matter of us not bringing in any products. I think at the time only necessities were being brought into the country. Plants weren't even on the top of the list. So it wasn't even a consideration in terms of importing plants during, so the Westerners don't know probably, but we were in a lockdown beginning March of 2020. And when we refer to lockdown, no one was allowed to move around except for people who were authorized within families to gather necessary supplies, right? I don't believe anyone was allowed to go to work even. The only exceptions were, again, people who were in high urgency positions, doctors, nurses, so medical frontliners, people who worked for hospitals, the like. So when I refer to lockdown here in the Philippines, I'm referring to a complete shutdown of the economy, complete shutdown of life as we knew it. Everybody was supposed to remain in their homes. And yeah, a lot of us turned to gardening and planting at the time. So even though there was a shutdown of the Dutch growing facilities, right, and production, we didn't experience much of it here because a lot of us couldn't go out to begin with. And that's why a lot of us turned to our plants, what little we had, and a lot of us turned to propagating our plants. Me included. So I'm assuming that this is in regards to the Russian military actions within Ukraine. We're probably going to see a little bit of that increase here as well, but it'll have an opposite effect, I think, on our plant community. If you watch Sean of Only Plants' fame, his video regarding what's happening in the Indonesian plant market and the dropping prices, we're kind of seeing similar things here in the Philippines, where interest seems to be waning, where prices seem to be dropping as well, not just because of interest dropping, but also because of an oversupply of sorry, I was gonna say content. What am I thinking? An oversupply of plants within the market. So these are not just the Holland plants, but we also have plants coming in from Thailand and Indonesia. So we have lots and lots of plants, bula plants, as we would say on Guam, right? Lots of plants coming in. And that is partially the reason why we're seeing a drop in interest here. There's more examples of how rare those prices of plants, how rare plant pricing just skyrocketed during the pandemic, right? There's that one example of the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. I believe it was a variegated one. Yeah, it doesn't mention here, but I'm almost positive it was a variegated Rhaphidophora tetrasperma that sold for 14,000 pounds. And yeah, that was kind of mind-blowing. And it was kind of awesome at the same time because it was such a gorgeous plant. None of us had seen it before. And whoa, yeah, crazy increase of price. I'll go ahead and post a screen grab of an article here so you can see it just in case you've never seen it before. A direct quote from this article: newspapers describe the sale as record-breaking, but several in the plant world told me they've witnessed sales for double that. And yeah, it's quite true. So plants here in the Philippines, there is talk or there was talk in a plant group that I belong to. And this one well-known seller was telling us about another garden, a really, really tightly run ship, essentially, tightly run production up in, or down in the south of the Philippines, Mindanao. And he said that if you don't have, hey, Plant Daddy, are you around? Do you remember how much it was that he said, if you don't have, what was it, 1,000,000 pesos in your bank account, they won't let you into the garden? Was that the price? Do you remember? Yeah. I'll go ahead and put the correct price on the bottom of the screen. And if I don't, that means that it was 1,000,000 pesos, right? So roughly translated, right? The exchange rate at that time would probably be about $20,000. So if you didn't have $20,000 at the time of that comment, at the time the comment was made, you wouldn't have been let in that garden. And yeah, so this 14,000 pound plant is nothing compared to what we've seen here. We've seen plants sold for, again, millions of pesos, not just 1,000,000, but millions of pesos. And it's both shocking. It's people are left with their mouths hanging. It's incredulous, and it's just, these are gorgeous plants. I don't blame these people for spending money on these plants, but the pricing was quite obscene. And I mean, yeah, just like the article said, they occurred during the lockdown, during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic. Also, yeah, so like most precious objects, the value of any given plant is derived from its scarcity. In one case of the most prized, the Monstera albo, it's down to unique white markings on the leaves known as variegation. The odds of a regular Monstera developing variegation are roughly 100,000 to 1, but this doesn't stop people from selling variegated Monstera seeds, which are essentially the magic beans of the plant world. We see those all the time here. And for what we see here, our plants are either brought in from Thailand. The Monstera albos are brought in from Thailand. There are beautiful plants that are brought in from Japan, and there are some really nice plants that are also brought in from Holland. Fantastic. The local plants that are here are usually cloned, so people take a cutting, they develop the root ball, the root set, and then they sell them as those planted clones. Now, that's probably one of the more reliable ways to get your Monstera and make sure it doesn't revert to all green, right? Versus variegated plants. And like the article said, 100,000 to 1. That's the odds. Those are the odds of getting a variegated plant from seeds. But even now, we still see seeds being sold on Shopee or Lazada, which are the Philippine equivalent of Amazon here, right? And they're selling pink Monstera deliciosas, which is the Miss Piggy that's being developed in Belgium, I believe. It's, I don't think, anywhere near release. I don't think it's even being developed. I think it's just an idea. I'll go ahead and put the link at the bottom of the screen along with a picture of the Miss Piggy. But yeah, that exact same plant, that Miss Piggy plant, has been taken from that Belgian website and is being used to sell these mystery seeds, because I don't even know if they're Monsteras, right? If they're Monstera deliciosas on top of that. So yeah, I mean, along with the good, which is people tending to plants, learning how to care for plants, bonding and making friendships over plants, we also here in the Philippines saw the rise of scammers. And the scams are incredible. They are. A direct quote from the article. Here we go. It's a houseplant bubble that has seen the growth of those most of human offshoots: plant speculation, plant swindling, and outright plant crime. Pot plant collections have been raided at gunpoint. Botanical gardens have been trimmed at scissor point, and some unscrupulous sellers have even taken to painting the leaves white. Okay, so plant collections being raided at gunpoint. Check that off our list. There was a infamous incident that just happened probably at the end of 2021 or early 2022, where this lady was just selling her plants through Facebook Live. We do that a lot here, live selling. It's quite exciting. It's like an auction, except not. First come, first serve, right? And a gunman came into her garden and swiped her phone. I mean, he put that gun to her head and swiped her phone from her. So it shocked the entire plant community. I don't know if there was any resolution from it, but you know, that's how, I guess that's how well off plant sellers are. I mean, they see a profit in the plants, and people who commit crimes see this as well, and they try to take advantage. So the second one was botanical gardens have been trimmed at scissor point. Even before the pandemic, I've seen people rip plants off of walls in public places, even in not so public places, like a friend's restaurant, right? Some unscrupulous sellers have even taken to painting the leaves white. Okay, let me flash this picture on the screen. Okay. Yeah. So we've seen a lot of these. We've seen a lot of variegated plants, variegated, right? Quote unquote, that were actually painted white. I'm at a loss for words. I understand that people need to make a living during the pandemic. I agree. You know, it was tough, especially when a lot of us couldn't go to work, when a lot of us couldn't even leave the house. You know, insecurity causes people to do desperate things. And while I would prefer to think that people were doing that because they had the best intentions in mind, I can't say that. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know what would push a person to put a gun to another person's head and, you know, steal their phone, which helps their livelihood and helps that person feed their family. But, you know, I can't also deny that there are probably some desperate people out there. And I hope that the people who are desperate enough to do that are able to find other means to actually support their families, especially now that the country, the Philippines in particular, has opened up its economy. There are no further lockdowns. There aren't any restrictions on movement. So hopefully everybody is bouncing back from what happened last year. So something made me laugh in this article. This is in regards to Tyler Thrasher, the guy with the cool podcast, Greenhouse Rants. So he was complaining about nodes, right? And this nodes refer to a part of the stem where you've got a leaf. That's usually where the node is, right? Is where there's a petiole that attaches the leaf to the stem. And usually around that node is where an axillary bud is. The axillary bud is where you've got growth, where you would get growth come out from a stem. So during the time of the pandemic, a lot more nodes started being sold off. And Tyler was complaining about that. He was calling them wet sticks, saying that the article says that they could be sold anywhere between 50 pounds to a few hundred pounds for a wet stick. And they're called wet sticks because usually these nodes are sold without roots. So yeah, you would have to do things to them. Put them in a Tupperware with some sphagnum moss and pray to the node gods that you're able to develop it properly. Anyhow, I digress. The odds of growing a plant from them are significantly reduced compared to full cuttings. Regardless, this article says, the practice has become so popular it even spawned a t-shirt line, "Send Nodes." Yeah. So that was one of, actually that's my very first t-shirt, my first punny t-shirt. And yeah, that definitely tickled me pink. Anyway, so Tyler Thrasher continues on by saying that you're selling a piece that could potentially form a new plant. So his emphasis was on the word potentially. People can't afford a fully grown plant when it costs $3,000, he says. So if someone says, hey, I've got a node for $200, people are willing to take the gamble. And that's the same thing we're seeing here in the Philippines. People are buying nondescript nodes. Many times they're being sold off as Philodendron Florida Beauties or Monstera albos, Monstera aureas. And people take years to grow, or months to grow them, up to a year, I've seen in some cases. And come to find out that these are Philodendron green emeralds that are growing. Or sometimes, even worse, they're not even philodendrons growing. They're completely different plants like Epipremnum pinnatums or Epipremnum aureums, golden pothos. Talk to online plant sellers and they'll tell you the sale of nodes was just the start. Some sellers advertise pieces of stem without even a growth point, a true quote-unquote wet stick, which has no potential to be a plant. Now that's a completely different subject. Those are popularly called spent nodes. And if you remember what I said earlier during the send nodes part of this video, a node, again, is a place which usually includes an axillary bud. And the axillary bud is where new growth would come off, essentially creating your new plant. Now, once the axillary bud is activated, right? Once the growth is activated, you get new growth. The problem arises when that new growth is removed from the plant. Either it rots off, it gets knocked off by accident, or worse, it's trimmed off and turned into a new plant, leaving just the spent node behind, which is why it's called spent, because the axillary bud was triggered, right? Activated. Now we get to the good part, right? The scams. So there is another storefront that was interviewed for this article called Jim Loves Plants. So Jimmy Rideout is the person who was interviewed. He gave the author of the opinion a list of scams, right? Wanton plant mislabeling, when it's obvious the plant in the picture is not the one that they're saying. 2, scamming size, where the scale is incorrect. Number 3 is cutting fraud. Okay, so cutting fraud? Oh my word. Okay, we'll come back to that, okay? So the examples that they have here, a lot of them deal with misrepresentation as well. You know, you've got misrepresentation of fact, misrepresentation by omission, and then possibly just an innocent case of misrepresentation, right? Let me go ahead and get you some legal statements here. So misrepresentation is an untrue statement of fact or law made by one party, usually the sellers in this case, to another party, which usually are the buyers, right? Which induces the buyers, we're going to refer to them as buyers, to enter a contract with the sellers, thereby causing the buyer's loss. So that's misrepresentation, period. That's according to Thomson Reuters. Now, in regards to the very first example, and I'm looking at the article again, and we're looking at the Calathea makoyana pink diamond. Yeah, that would probably be a misrepresentation of fact. And according to Cornell University, their law school, a misrepresentation of fact means a false statement of substantive fact or conduct that leads to a belief of a substantive fact material to proper understanding of the matter in hand, made with the intent, very important, made with the intent to deceive or mislead. So there's an intent component to misrepresentation of fact, right? It's one thing to provide a false statement of substantive fact, right? or to act in a way that would make someone believe that that substantive factual material is one way or another. But to have the intent to do so, I mean, that's something else. You actually go out of your way to deceive another person. And that's why I'm saying that would probably go along with what Jimmy Rideout is saying as far as wanton plant mislabeling, which the example he used is when it's obvious the plant in the picture is not the one they're saying. Kind of like gaslighting, if you want to think about it. Oh yeah. An example that I've seen here is where someone was selling a Epipremnum aureum, so commonly known as a golden pothos. This seller was selling a golden pothos and was selling it as a Monstera deliciosa aurea, a Monstera aurea, right? So the yellow variegated form of a Monstera deliciosa. And this seller caused an uproar with people pointing out that this plant was in fact not a Monstera aurea. You know, it's a golden pothos, people told this person. And this seller insisted, no, it is not, and I'm only selling it for 5,000 pesos, which is roughly $100. Monstera aureas at the time were going for about 35,000 pesos, which is roughly $600. $600 versus $100. I don't know about you, but I mean, if it's too good to be true, right? But while everyone was arguing with the seller about the right thing to do, the seller revised their post. I'm trying very carefully not to out this seller, right? But the seller revised the post and marked it as sold, meaning someone fell for the title, the wanton mislabeling of this plant, despite correction from others, and bought the plant. But I have seen a house painter leave the exact dabbling on window panes. Yeah, sound familiar, right? Man, I tell ya. Now, Robert also commented on a scandal that pretty much rocked the plant world as well. Yeah, so this was before the pandemic, 2019. It still continues to rock the plant world, and give me a second, I'll tell you why. So, I enjoy this a lot, actually. I don't know Robert personally, but I've seen him around, and man, he knows his stuff, right? It calls him the Batman of everything. So if you've seen him around, you know that he was also involved in breaking down the Soderoy scandal, the variegated Soderoy scandal. Another mind blower right there. The article refers to the Philodendron pink Congo. If you've ever owned a pink Congo, you know what I'm talking about. Those beautiful cotton candy pink leaves that are really attractive in terms of, you know, pink foliage, right? So we've got the Philodendron pink princess who has pink leaves. We've got the strawberry shake who has some pink mixed in. The caramel marble who may have some pink, right? So we've got those beautiful pink plants, and in light of those three, hey, here we've got a Philodendron pink Congo. Unfortunately, yeah, calling it millennial pink, the pink doesn't last. The pink fades into green eventually, and a lot of people paid a lot of good money for them, you know. The Philodendron pink princess used to go for a lot of money, and the Philodendron pink Congo at the time was actually a very good bargain compared to it. I refer to bargain in terms of cost of the plant, not the value, okay? McCracken, rapidly establishing himself as the Batman of everything potted, was on the case. As soon as I saw it, he tells me, I knew it was not a thing of nature. Yeah, so, to imagine being described as not a thing of nature, right? Yeah, kind of feel bad for pink Congo sellers, but this is where it's important, right? To disclose and to be transparent about how the pink Congo became pink to begin with. His research led him to an Indonesian webpage, which McCracken speaks some of the language, that detailed the process of artificially pinkening the leaves of the philodendrons by gassing them with a chemical that stimulates ethylene production. And there it is. So it wasn't a scam, you know, it was an omission, which, okay, sorry guys. It was an omission, which, according to Cornell earlier, the Cornell definition of misrepresentation I gave you, is important in finding out whether or not all facts are provided to the seller or to the buyers, right? In order to have a contract, the buyers or the sellers need to disclose all material facts to the buyers. It's the only decent thing to do too. But in this case, a lot of the sellers were not disclosing the fact that pink Congos were artificially induced plants, that the pink wasn't going to last. So a lot of people spent good money on these plants that weren't what they thought they were. And the reason I say that they're making a comeback, I mean, the article says that they're making a comeback as well. So Robert McCracken's disclosure pretty much, here we go, went viral, and demand for the pink Congo instantly tanked. A friend told me, and this is a quote, a friend told me that on the day of my post she lost 200 orders. You know, sad, but if people didn't know, if this disclosure wasn't made, then, you know, right. Now, in terms of the pink Congo, we also see white Congos out on the market, and I haven't looked into it myself, but a lot of the chatter that I'm hearing right now is that they're also artificially induced plants. So that's my disclaimer. I have not looked into this personally, and I'm just relaying gossip that I'm hearing, okay? Because that's all it is. It's hearsay, it's gossip. But in light of what happened with the pink Congo scandal, I would like to think that a lot of plant buyers are a little bit more careful when it comes to Congos that come with different colored leaves. So take the different colored Congos with a grain of salt. Do your research, like I said in my disclaimers at the beginning of this video. Do your due diligence before you go down that route, okay? Now, another thing that was mentioned was the Spiritus Sancti Jose Bueno hybrid, and that rocked the plant world pretty bad last year. The whole implication of such a hybrid, Spiritus Sancti, which is the Holy Grail, this beautiful narrow plant, right? I have a video of mine. It's not quite a juvenile, but it's not mature either, so it's an in-between phase right now. But you could check it out, see what it looks like right now, and see what it's gonna look like someday. Now, according to the article, people were paying $1,200 for seedlings, for tiny little plantlets of these hybrids, right? And sorry if I'm spoiling the story by putting a quotation mark there, but it is what it is. As the article goes, there was a seller who brought the plants to get it tested, and DNA tests came back. Like Mari says, you're not the father. Yeah, it wasn't a Spiritus Sancti at all. It was all Jose Bono, right? Ouch. So, yeah, Tyler Thrasher referred to it as something out of the Jerry Springer show. You know, I'm a little older, I guess, Tyler, I'm sorry. But during my time, it was Mari Povich, right? You are not the father. The crowd goes wild. And, yeah, it did cause a little bit of a uproar in the plant community, in the international plant community at the time that the information did come out. It pretty much knocked the breath out of a lot of people. And which brings me to Tyler's point, where He says that the most apt analogy of this whole plant bubble right now is cryptocurrency. It's unregulated. He's known people to take out loans up to $45,000 to buy one of everything, with ideas of propagating and making a fortune from propagating. But he says, I can't tell you how many people I've seen a year later selling scraps of plants saying, I got in over my head. And if you watched my Philippine plant market video in response to Only Plants, to Sean's video, same thing here. We have a lot of people who saw the rising prices of plants, you know, the golden pots, as this article calls it, saw the rising prices and decided that they want in, and, you know, bought up a whole lot of stock in plants. Now, you've got the Philodendron uepis who are out there being sold at only a fraction of what they used to be, you know, maybe 10% of what they used to be. So yeah, even people who have gotten into the plant game, into plant sales, and stocked up on variegated plants, I think they're also starting to see a little bit of the drop in pricing, or the drop in demand. So hopefully those people didn't spend up to $45,000 buying up one of everything. And this also goes for Philodendron Florida Beauties, Monstera albos, Monstera aureas. All of these variegated plants across the board are also, their prices are decreasing. So yeah, there are no plants that are safe as far as the cryptocurrency analogy is concerned. So I won't blame anybody for losing interest in the hobby, or for, I guess, moving on. But I do feel a little bit for the people who've invested so much into the hobby, thinking that it was going to last a long time, and they wanted to take advantage of the pricing. Yeah, I do feel for them. Let's see. Yeah, so another thing that the article mentions here is prop lifting. And the article actually refers to it as the practice of stealing cuttings from nurseries and botanical gardens. That was something that Christine St. Clair from Florida referred to. I guess she also sells some propagations of her own, because the article says that she refuses to let people purchasing plants from her pick them up in person. Living in Florida, many of her tropical plants grow outdoors, and she worries that they might be casing the joint. And, you know, it's very true. There was a popular grower who was robbed blind of multiple variegated billetiers close to the holiday season. I'll mention their name here because it is all over Facebook. They did put out warnings about the theft. It was Bedrock Gardens. If you want to look them up on Facebook, you might be able to find the post still. But yeah, they had a guard, they had security cameras, and multiple variegated billetiers, which were at the time still being priced. I don't know if this is their pricing, okay? But the average market pricing for billetiers of multiple nodes and leaves quantities were in the high 100,000 peso range, 2 million peso range. So there was a lot that was stolen, right? I think it even made the news, the national news. So I don't blame people who don't want to meet buyers at their gardens or at their homes, just because there is that aspect of plant keeping here in the Philippines that is kind of worrisome. And apparently it's also worrisome in the US, where people would steal. What am I talking about? Personally, yeah, I've seen that too. So my mother and my sister keep plants at my mother's home on Guam, and their gorgeous philodendron, their variegated philodendron pedatum was cut. And they don't know who, they don't know how their pedatum was cut. Several nodes were cut off of the plant. And It's just, my parents have a gate at the front, a concrete fence surrounding the property. So someone actually came onto their property just to take cuttings of their plants. So it does get kind of obscene. Plant keeping gets obscene to begin with the pricing, and then people do this to each other. It's just, you know, there's some things that kind of make me want to step back from the plant keeping community, and sometimes it's things like this, seeing things like this, you know. Yeah, even the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, they've been dealing with people prop lifting or stealing cuttings from their plants. And what they refer to here in the article is that plants now worth fortunes are on open display at Kew Gardens. Quote, in previous years, growers haven't been able to sell all of their stock. Now they're retiring on one plant. And yeah, we were seeing that during the height of the pandemic here in the Philippines. Not so much anymore. We do see the variegated UFBIs. The variegated micans is becoming a little bit more common now. We have the white or aurea, I'm not sure which one. We have the white or aurea variegation, and then we also have micans that are pink variegated. So we've got a couple of variegations floating around here. We have the variegated UFBI, so that one is going to be a little bit more in demand. I'm trying to think what else. The variegated golden dragon seems to be holding its price well. The variegated pedatum seems to be holding its price well. There are some variegated plants like the Bilitiae, which seems to be losing its standing as far as pricing is concerned. Okay, not value, but yeah, we're seeing that as well. Some more scams. In cases of much priced Monstera albos, several sellers told me they saw regular Monstera sold as albos, but they're actually plants infected with a mosaic virus. So remember when I mentioned Robert McCracken earlier and the Soderoy scandal? Look it up. So in terms of these variegated Soderoy, Sean actually put out a emergency broadcast video on YouTube. Okay, I'm using his words. I'm not a scientist and offer no answers. All I can do is compile cases and create a platform for discussion. So these variegated Soderoy had issues that people were seeing across the globe, and Sean actually said that he thought that perhaps it was a case of a bad case of tissue culturing. So if that was the case, all of this should have been stopped, and all of it should have been, I mean, no more plants should have been released from that same batch. You know, we don't want to spread it around, and it was important not to pretend that it's something it isn't. You know, that's how viruses are spread, is by sticking our head in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist. Sean did some good work there, as did Robert McCracken. Release the McCracken. Yeah, definitely. Release the McCracken. He did great there too. So here the article actually says that there are several, I guess, measures put into place in some places in the world. So in the UK, right, working with the UK Border Force, this is from the article itself, Kew set up Flora Guard, which aims to track illegal plant trade by using AI algorithms to search the internet for chatter. Pretty awesome in my opinion. You know, it would search for keywords like wet stick, but also specific species. Hello, plant poachers. I'd be afraid of this. I'm just saying. Yet, Facebook, she says, would not allow the algorithm to penetrate their private groups, meaning that for now, traders remain shielded from Kew's prying eyes, which completely stinks. We want to prevent illegal plant trade because, one, they're not regulated. Two, because they're not regulated, we don't know what those plants are carrying, if anything. I mean, do we really want to devastate local populations of plants? Plants that are within the country legally, costing, I can't even imagine the amount of money it would cost. Any kind of destruction. And don't forget, poaching within those places where the plants originated. Do we really want to destroy those environments as well? The article closes with Kaylee Ellen, right? She was one of the people who exposed the pink Congo scandal, and I remember that pretty vividly. She says that because of the exposure on her YouTube channel, she's had to pay a price where she's been harassed through email. People were signing her up for all sorts of things. She says presumably by disgruntled sellers signing her up for drug-related stuff, places that sell fake plants. I'm not going to mention anything else just in case it triggers. People have even been posting pretending to be her. And I mean, it's kind of wild how far the harassment of people who are exposing these kind of things go, right? But she makes a great closing point, and she says in one of her videos, we just need to look out for each other. And that's what I'm hoping this video will achieve also, is that yeah, so we may have some unicorn plants. Maybe our plants might mutate, maybe not. If we're doing things to enhance our plants, to induce variegation, let's be transparent about everything, right? If you don't know where the variegation of your plant came from, and it looks questionable because the leaves are distorted or the plant keeps dying no matter how much propagating you do, maybe it's time to ask someone for help. Maybe it's time to get the leaves tested. If the leaves look bleached, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about the soderoids again, right? If the leaves look bleached, yeah, I would definitely have that tested. I mean, you're not only affecting your reputation as a seller, but you're also affecting the entire plant community, you know, everyone's plants. Anyway, yeah, so along with the good side of plants is the dark side, and I just hope that this video actually helps people identify the common scams that come along with owning rare plants. That was a lot that we discussed, and I would like to keep the discussion continuing. Just leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I'll get to you when I can. Subscribe, turn on that notification bell to get future notifications of videos I may post. Check me out on Facebook. I'm there. I post memes. I post longer write-ups. I share posts that I find interesting and I think my followers would find interesting. Give me a follow there. I'm there as Tasteful Nodes. And also check me out on Instagram if you need some late night scrolling. I post pretty pictures there as well. I am on Instagram as Tasteful Nodes. Okay, guys, it was fun. It was really fun. But until next time, okay? Sa uulitin, keep your nodes classy and tasteful. Bye.